self-evidently in our interest. That is sufficient economic analysis.
He's referring to Brexit.
The cost of food, clothing and footwear. The price of food, of clothing, of footwear.
This video is going to show you the promises versus the reality of Brexit. And the warning sign, some of the stories are pretty triggering. A lot of people were conned, a lot of people were lied to, and a lot of people seem to be quite happy with the result.
Cheaper food, clothing and footwear, which we will get when we are free to set our own economic policies.
They'll have to put up the price of food that's imported from the European Union because of new post-Brexit border checks which come into force today. The Fresh Produce Consortium estimate that the additional red tape will cost the food industry £200 million.
Have cheaper food, cheaper shoes, cheaper bras. We can give people cheaper food, cheaper bras, cheaper shoes. It's a massive opportunity.
So you say things which are going up, certainly transport, packaging, wages, all three. Nothing coming down, nothing coming down. This time last year, a lorry from Spain cost £2,200 to get to the Bristol market. Now we are paying £3,600. It can't be absorbed anymore.
How are you doing? Did I just hear this morning that you would guarantee farmers would get exactly the same amount of payments that they do already?
That's what we're saying, and that's what George Eustice, the farming minister, has said. No government in its right mind is going to want to take away any support from farming.
Will you be joining me in celebrating the 4 years since we departed from the EU?
No, not whatsoever. None whatsoever. Hasn't benefited British agriculture one iota. In fact, it's damaged us. It's destroyed our ability to export to the EU. We had built massive trade with beef and sheep, and lamb, fish, dairy products, which now we're not allowed to sell. We can't sell to the EU because of the red tape.
We've got our fish back. They're now British fish, and they're better and happier fish for it.
Obviously, there's overwhelming evidence for that.
The acid test for Brexit is fishing.
I think it is.
Solution to things like quotas and the impact on our fishing industry, and nothing has really got better for fishermen. And I think it's coming back to us, the European movement, when we speak to the industry, that Brexit, despite all of the promises, has delivered nothing for the industry.
It's sad, really, because we can't improve the industry anymore because there's nothing for them to catch. There's no fish for them to catch. The industry is finished now, virtually. There's only the one ship left now in the UK, deep sea trawler. Since Brexit, when we lost the Norwegian quota, we're only in Norwegian waters for 2 weeks, then we have to go up into the Svalbard. The weather conditions in the Svalbard, in my experience over 45 years of fishing, 48 years of fishing, is you don't go up there in January, February. The weather's too bad. It's best to stay away. But they have to go fishing now, because the government's pushed them into it. Before Brexit, we had the quota and we used to stay on the Norwegian coast. Still cold weather, bad weather, but was near to help if we needed help. When we were up in the Svalbard, in the Spitsbergen areas and that, there's no one there to help us if we get into difficulties. My grandson at my retirement party last year, he said, "Grandad, you've inspired me to go to sea." And I just turned around and said, "You're not going to sea." There's no future for him. The fishing industry is at rock bottom now. It's at its end, in my opinion.
To the broad sunlit uplands that are awaiting us, even as we enter November, there will be broad sunlit uplands.
Have plans in place to ensure that we can get all of the drugs into the country in whatever the Brexit scenario. That includes the very short shelf life isotopes that are needed for treating cancer, and so there are plans in place to make sure that all of that can happen. We've been working very hard on making sure that the NHS is there in all circumstances, in whatever the Brexit vote.
Medicine shortages. Genuinely? How concerned should people be?
We should be concerned because every day, as a pharmacist, we're seeing patients who we cannot provide the medications that they need. And it's hours that our teams are spending to try and get hold of medication. And it's also disrupting for patients. You're getting a routine of taking your medication, and then suddenly you turn up at the pharmacy and the pharmacy say, "We can't get hold of it." And that is not because of us down at the pharmacy, because we're not making the drugs in the pharmacy, but down to the whole supply chain that is on top of the pharmacy system, where we are absolutely struggling. And these manufacturers are suggesting things like shortages of raw material, increase in prices, but we are hearing, as this report says, that Brexit has played a part in that. And the real reason for that is currently before Brexit, we would be part of the European Medicines Agency for drugs approval. Now it's going to be in the UK where drugs are approved, and we're much slower at doing that.
The first ever Farage at Large we did was in Port Talbot in South Wales, and I talked there about steel.
Brexiteers like Nigel Farage in the last couple of days has blamed the closure of the steelworks on net zero hysteria or climate policy. How much truth is in that?
None is a simple answer. Why is it that the Netherlands plant at IJmuiden and Tata's operations elsewhere in the EU are not being affected, and yet it's the UK's operations, and particularly those in Wales, that are taking the brunt of the redundancies?
There will be no downside to Brexit at all, and considerable upside.
People come into London because of global movement of services and people themselves. You look at the London housing market, the London construction market. Are you telling me that it depends on the EU? Actually, it doesn't. It's international.
Because they can't supply the windows and doors, and nothing else can be finished until they're fitted, and they can't get them because of Brexit.
I think that there are certain geographic regions that have certain shortages in different trades, but broadly speaking, this is widespread. I mean, if you factor Brexit in, even in London alone, we've seen a 30% reduction in the number of foreign workers in construction. So it's a universal problem.
It's more the building workforce, because we used to, on our building sites, we used to employ a lot of Europeans. So that, and there aren't enough newly qualified builders coming through the system in the UK. So that's annoying. But yeah, also people have complained about their bigger practice is not being able to have enough staff, especially as the European trained architects are really good. So they really want them to come and work in the UK. So that's annoying.
Right now, it feels harder than ever to find a home.
Ruined my entire year, if not my entire life.
Bidding wars, damp, mould, personality contests.
Like X Factor.
Evictions for no reason and skyrocketing rent.
Entirely unfair and completely unmanageable.
Basically like the Wild West. So what's going on in the UK right now? And is it really the worst time ever to be a renter?
The challenge facing first-time buyers today is bigger than anything we've seen before. Just this year alone, the price of a home in the UK has soared by an average of 9.8% to £278,000, which is £24,000 higher than this time last year. And in 2021, prices rose faster than wages. So that if you're one of the millions and millions of people outside the housing market and you're looking in, for every week and month that goes by, the dream of home ownership recedes further into the distance.
The worst case scenario, economically, is better than where we are today.
It has cost the UK economy billions of pounds in lost trade and tax revenue. That's according to research shared with ITV News by the respected think tank, the Centre for European Reform. It estimates the economy is 5% smaller than it would have been if the UK had stayed in the EU. It also found trade in goods and investment were 13% lower, but services were 7% higher if Brexit hadn't happened.
The truth is that if we vote to leave, we'll be in an economically stronger position.
A piece of analysis that you did at Bloomberg paints this gloomy picture for the UK economy regarding the hit from Brexit. What have you found?
So we looked at sort of the impact of Brexit through a number of angles. There's the sort of classic angle, just looking at the headline impact on GDP, and that's the number you've said there, this £100 billion number, which is essentially that we think the economy is about 4% smaller than it otherwise would have been had it remained in the single market.
What's certain is the economy is not going to do very well for a very long time. But what the price of Brexit is like throwing sand in the engine of your car. What is certain is this doesn't have to cause a massive recession, but it will cause the economy to have a lower rate of productivity growth for a significantly long time.
And we've looked at other angles as well, so the impact on investment, which is well known, the impact on uncertainty has come through and really damaged investment in the UK. Trade as well is a little bit weaker, though it's not quite as weak as we would have expected. You'd expect that to be one of the key channels through which Brexit affects the economy. And I think the broad takeaway from this is that the impact of Brexit has come through far quicker than we'd expected.
That sent the pound down about 10% against
our trading partners, and that makes imports more expensive. It also makes our exports more competitive. But in this case, our exports didn't budge. They didn't go up at all, but our import prices went up. And that raised inflation by about 2 to 3%. So that simply made people poorer.
When it's been calculated that the immediate cost of that was about £870 per household.
Clearly, the impact of Brexit is quite profound. I mean, in a sense, foreign exchange markets were saying you have devalued the economy.
Is there a world in which it could have benefited our economy?
No, I don't think so.
Starting to see a very interesting pattern emerging, comparing Britain with the performance of other advanced economies. After the pandemic, there was a trade recovery by all the other G7 countries, and Britain's trade recovery has been more or less flat.
So the UK fell behind in its trade intensity.
One of the other things you can measure is the drop-off in the number of trade relationships between smaller companies in the UK and their foreign counterparts. But it also tells you something about the way that smaller companies in the UK used to grow by gradually expanding their business, selling stuff into the European single market, and that's simply not happening anymore.
Brexit is and was and will be a total disaster.
Brexit is doing the economy real damage.
Brexit, as negotiated, is frankly a disaster.
Do you know what? What I'm asked about, are we going to be richer or poorer with Brexit? Do you know what my answer is? What price freedom? What price liberty?
Exactly.
What price our identity?
Exactly.
And these are the arguments, actually, that really matter.
To leave. What? The false promises of, now we're saving all this money from pumping it into the EU economy where it's a black hole. We'll be spending that on, you guys, the communities and businesses, and it's just a bunch of lies.
Yet some people out of all this still seem quite happy with the result, despite the destruction they caused. If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button.
Life at me's been pretty good. After years of campaigning to leave the European Union, I won. And life is superb. But I've come out of retirement because Britain is broken. Nothing works anymore, does it? Nothing works. The health service, travelling anywhere, trying to get your kids or grandkids to get a house, rents have gone through the roof. Nothing actually works.
So despite all the destruction he caused by telling everyone to vote that way, it turns out it doesn't work. He knows that, but now he's got to blame a new group of people. Once again, thank you to all of my supporters. Thank you to my YouTube and Patreon subscribers who keep this channel going and growing. If you'd like to support the channel, please click that like and subscribe button. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.